Midleton Rare, the pinnacle of Irish whiskey, vintage 2019. Welcome to another episode of Erik Wait Whiskey Studies, and I am kicking off my Irish whiskey marathon with a top-of-the-line whiskey from Midleton Distillery. Now, to really understand, I think, any, say, wine region or whiskey region, you really need to experience the very best, the top of the line that they have, as well as the most economic, I would say, the bottom shelf. Because the reality of how the quality is of a region, of a producer, is really somewhere in the middle. But to really better appreciate that sort of middle range, right, which is usually your core range, you gotta need to experience both the top and the bottom. And this is my approach to the wine as well. So having very top of the line, say, Bordeaux. I've been to 4 of the 5 first growth of Bordeaux, but also taste a lot of, say, budget of Bordeaux as well. And the same thing goes for the Napa Valley or California as a whole, and or Australia, right? Penfolds Grange is the most expensive from Penfolds, which is absolutely superb. You're knocking $700–800, and that's a little insane, I know. And I'm talking wine on a whiskey channel, but then you also have to try the more budget bottles as well, because the truth about the region and about the wines is really somewhere in the middle. You know, the top of the line and the bottom of the line aren't really the truest expression of what the average person is going to consume. So I wanted to kick off this Irish whiskey marathon with something special and with a special bottle, because Midleton is a distillery not only produces this bottle but a number of other different brands. So I'm going to start off with Midleton Distillery, and we're going to go through a whole lineup of other brands that come from Midleton Distillery. So before I get into this and open this up, here is a little bit of information about the Midleton Distillery. Midleton is one of the most modern distilleries in the world, and its production areas are linked to each other via fiber optic networks. But more importantly, the distillery is equipped with 3 75,000-liter pot stills, the largest currently in operation worldwide. It also has 3 column stills, which are used in combination to produce different types of whiskey. With a total production capacity of 64 million liters per year, the distillery is the largest in Ireland. The distillery also hosts a micro distillery with smaller pot stills, which have the capacity to produce around 50,000 liters of alcohol per year. As a result of the different still combinations that can be achieved, a range of different products can be produced. The most significant brands are Midleton Very Rare, Jameson, Powers, Redbreast, Green Spot, Yellow Spot, and Patty. Now, normally I would like to get into the history behind the distillery and so on and so forth, but there's already a lot of great videos out there talking about the history of Irish whiskey. And to really understand this whiskey, you need to understand the history and why the Irish whiskey industry is structured the way in which it is. Long story short, due to prohibition, due to poor choices they made, due to wars, due to taxes, due to, you name it, eventually they all came down to one distillery, as distillery after distillery after distillery closed. Now, if you want more information about that, I'll put a link down in the description box below to some really good videos about the history of Irish whiskey. Now, right now, in 2020, Ireland is experiencing a renaissance as new distilleries are opening up. So eventually whittled all the way down to one distillery, and then 3 distilleries, 4 distilleries, and now there is an expansion of distilleries, which we're still sort of waiting to see the whiskeys that come out of them, right? So Midleton is one distillery that produces a number of different brands, and the ways in which it doesn't produce like just the same whiskey, just with different labels with all the different brands, is the way in which it uses the pot stills, the column stills, and of course the casks that are used to represent the different styles of whiskeys and the different profiles of the brands that are coming out of the distillery. Now, I'm trying to think of an analogy of how one distiller can produce a number of different brands. If you think of oil refineries, it's not that, say, here in California, Shell and Chevron and all these other gas stations, all these brands of gasoline all have their own refinery. There's a local refinery which produces the fuel, and then all the various brands. It's kind of strange to be comparing whiskey with gasoline, but one refinery can produce gasoline that then all the different brands of gasoline use their own additives to produce their way of making their own product, right? There's somewhat of an analogy between one distillery that is used to produce multiple different brands, and yet they don't all taste the same. They all have their own character and so forth. Or perhaps, if we get a little closer to home, in the Napa Valley, you have what's called the Beckstoffer vineyards. There's a number of different Beckstoffer vineyards, which supply grapes to a number of different wineries that produce a wine, a Beckstoffer vineyard wine, and yet those different wineries aren't all producing the same wine. They taste different because of what differently they do with the grapes from that vineyard, right? And the oak treatment and the fermentation, the yeast they use, and everything else that goes into wine production. Well, I think that's somewhat analogous to what it goes on at Midleton, and perhaps a little more pleasing than making an analogy between gasoline and whiskey. But that's what's sort of going on here is a number of different brands are deriving their spirit from these stills at Midleton Distillery. So I'm going to be doing a bunch of different Irish whiskeys, that all of which come from Midleton, and yet the price range and the quality range is going to be vast. All right, so we'll see everything that comes out of Midleton. But in the meantime, I wanted to start with this particular bottle. Now, be honest with you, it's a beautiful presentation. It's wood, and you can't smell this. Even the wood that this comes in, the little box it comes into, smells wonderful. It has a beautiful smell to it, right? It's a real nice varnish. It's very fancy. It has these little doors on it with magnets in it that keep it closed, right? And then it has a very fancy bottle, which is a little challenging to get out of there, to be honest with you. Kind of pop it out of there, right? It comes with a little notebook. Now, all this stuff, I like artful presentation. I like marketing. I like advertising. I like branding. I like labels. I like pretty bottles, right? But we all know the most important thing is, what is the quality of the whiskey like? And there's a part of me that struggles with this because, one, with something so beautiful, so attractive, with a bottle that's so rare, and yes, it's expensive, there can be a temptation to, ooh, this is rare. It'll become a collector's item, and the price of it will go up, and I'll be drinking. And once I open this, in fact, once I empty this, what good is the box when the bottle itself is empty? And what am I going to do with this box, right? Perhaps I could, I don't know, make an urn out of it. When I die and they can cremate me, they can bury me in this box. I don't know. What are you supposed to do with this? It's pretty. I could, fill it up with some other whiskey. But what do you do with all this? It seems like a lot of money and effort goes into something which, if you actually use the whiskey as it's designed to be, which is consumed, it seems like a little bit extravagant, a little bit of waste going in there. Not complaining. I think it's beautiful. I personally would rather, hey, shave off $10, whatever it's going to cost for this thing, bring it down, and let's just get a bottle. A cardboard tube is good enough for me for the presentation. All right, so let me tell you a little bit about this whiskey, and then we'll get into it. Midleton Very Rare Vintage, released 2019. The Midleton Very Rare Vintage bottlings were first created in 1984 and released annually since then. Midleton Very Rare is one of the most exclusive and sought-after Irish whiskies. Once a year, the master distiller hand selects only the finest and rarest whiskies available to him, and then carefully blends them to create each annual vintage of Midleton Rare Vintage release. Only a limited number of bottles of this unique Irish whiskey vintage are released each year. The 36th edition is a masterfully blended Irish whiskey from distillates laid down at Midleton Distillery, County Cork, over the past 4 decades. Crafted by master distiller Brian Nation, Midleton Very Rare 2019 combines hand-selected single pot still and single grain Irish whiskies matured exclusively in lightly charred ex-bourbon American oak barrels for between 13 and 34 years, the oldest dating back to 1985. Alrighty, so the bottle comes with a plastic seal, which I've already removed. Now, I don't have a ton of experience with Irish whiskeys. I did a number of different reviews, which are no longer on my channel, of Irish whiskeys from minis, but I haven't spent enough time with them, but I've been wanting to for a very long period of time. So, while I understand, some of the historical differences, I've been watching a number of different videos on YouTube about the history, about pot still, and so on and so forth, as well as reading some books and online literature. I don't have a great deal of sensory experience, so I'm still somewhat very curious about what to expect from this whiskey, and hopefully this won't be just the top of the line. That a number of other whiskeys will also be impressive, but let's get into it. So color-wise, looks like a dark apple juice actually, sort of golden and copper, really bright and shiny. Now, one of the things I'm sort of, I guess, wishing this bottle had was more alcohol. It is bottled at 40% alcohol by volume. And when you spend this much on a whiskey and it's this classy, you would hope they might put something a little bit higher into it. Not that you can't get a great whiskey out of something at this ABV, but it's like, come on guys, spend this much money, it's this supposed to be this rare of a whiskey, let's bring it up a notch. So on the nose, medium intense aromas of the vanilla, lighter caramels. Speaking of apple, I do get some apple, pear, honey. There's a lemon, but it's more like a lemon pie. In fact, the apple is more of an apple pie with cinnamon. The spices, the baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, vanilla, all this coming from the oak. There's a little bit of ginger, candied ginger. I'm also getting stone fruits, getting a little bit of apricot, a little bit of peach. The cinnamon is really popping right now. Some minor floral notes as well. Maybe some orange blossoms. All right, so I'm getting apples. I would say more like baked apples, like apple pie. I'm getting pear, stone fruits, getting apricot, peaches, spice. I'm getting cinnamon and nutmeg, getting vanilla, citrus. I do get a little bit of orange and lemon. All right, on the palate. Now, of course, the danger of doing a neck pour in a video like this is I've got a solid rule. Generally, I don't judge a whiskey by neck pour. Some whiskeys can be less than promising from the neck and then open up really nice. However, I've never had a whiskey that it was really nice at a neck pour that then got worse as it got down. I've never had that happen. They've always opened up and either remained the same or got even better. But as a general principle, I don't judge a whiskey by neck pour. However, that being said, this is impressive. It has a lot of elegance, a lot of grace. The development is really nice, and the finish, it doesn't fade. It is not only long in terms of how long you taste it, but when I was saying, imagine the volume. It doesn't sort of drop off incrementally. It sort of really hangs in there. One of my goals in this whiskey marathon, an Irish whiskey marathon, I'll be going through over 20 Irish whiskeys over the next couple of months. is by the end of that, I should have had enough Irish whiskeys to have a solid impression of the general characteristics of Irish whiskey, what really makes them stand out and distinguish themselves from, say, Scotch and other whiskeys from around the world, but also understand the range of it. Now, one of the challenges of this is because Ireland is going through such a huge renaissance, that any book you read right now, any articles you read right now are quickly to become obsolete because there's so many changes going on at the moment. The same goes for the whiskeys as well. Wherever the whiskeys are at now, whatever you're tasting now, where they will be at and how will they continue to improve over the next 5, 10 years and so forth, I think we're expecting not only in terms of increase in quantity, but increase in quality, because they're not going to go back to just mass production. We're living in the era of the craft distiller. Even to say over in Scotland, all the new distilleries that are popping up, they're not just putting out huge factories of producing massive amounts of alcohol as they did in the past. What you're seeing is an increase in craft distilleries. Same thing's going on here in the United States, say down in Texas as well. We're living in the era of the craft producer. I like the mouthfeel. It's got a silky, glossy mouthfeel. People might describe it as oily, but it's more silky and glossy, and it carries a lot of flavor. So right up front, apples, pears, and again, that's apple, like apple pie, pears, then citrus, a little bit of orange, a little bit of lemon, vanilla, and it isn't a vanilla bomb. It's really well integrated in with the other flavors. Then those baking spices, the cinnamon, the nutmeg, the lighter caramels, and the finish is really, 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 really long. I think it's got a lot of balance. I think it's got a lot of elegance. I think everything is harmonized really, really, really well, and the development is really, really, really nice. What would I give this in terms of a score? And this is not a challenge, right? It's fancy bottle, fancy box, big price tag, big name, right? So you might have this sort of temptation to go a little bit overboard on the score and overrate it for what it is. But I'm going to give it a solid 90 points, a solid 90 points. Reality is, the truth is, there are a whole lot of whiskeys out there. If you're just talking about the whiskey itself, there are a whole lot of other whiskeys out there that bang for the buck, I would prefer over this one, that I would give higher scores, right? That I would like more, that would cost $100 or less. So if you're just talking about the whiskey itself, sure, I think there may even be some other Irish whiskeys. We'll see as we continue on with the Irish Whiskey Marathon. Maybe there's even some under $100 of Irish whiskeys that might be better than this. Nevertheless, that being said, it is a very, very, very well crafted whiskey that is elegant. It's not a powerful in terms of a strength, but in terms of, like, sort of that kaboom in flavor. But it has really nice development. It has a really long finish. It really is an excellent, excellent, excellent Irish whiskey. It has enough of finesse and elegance and development and complexity to get me to that 90-point score. What would I want to go 90, more than 90 to get me higher? It needs higher ABV. It needs a little bit more oomph. It needs a little bit more depth of flavor, right? It's got the length, but it needs more depth. I would like a little bit more of a power in the depth of the flavors to go past 90 points, right? I wouldn't want to go under 90 because I think the layers of complexity and the length of the finish is really what is giving it to that 90 point score level. So, alrighty. If you have subscribed to this channel, well, thank you very much. If you're one of my patrons and you've joined my group, I want to thank you very much. If you like my videos, but you have not yet subscribed, I would ask that you subscribe. Give this video a thumbs up, share with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, and other social networking channels. And until next time, cheers.